Algier out to the 35. This time London. He held on. He's on the slip through and score. Bates talking. Jesse Bates interception. 15-10-5. Drive home safely.
What is up, Falcons fans? This is Tori McElhaney, joined with Terrin Waack. It's a little bit of a different duo today because Will McFadden is currently at the hospital welcoming baby boy number 2 to the McFadden family. So honestly, great day to be a McFadden, maybe not so great day to be an Atlanta Falcon. The Atlanta Falcons lost 34-10 to the Miami Dolphins, a one-win team coming into this game, with their only win coming against a team that didn't earn their first win until today. It was kind of a clunker of a game from start to finish, and Terrin and I are going to go through it all. If you're new here, as a reminder, we have 4 topics that we split into 4 quarters, 6 minutes apiece. When the whistle blows, we're moving on. So, Terrin, are you ready to get into this one?
As ready as I'll ever be.
Okay, let's do it. Quarter 1. I kind of wanted to pose this question to you, Terrin, and also to me and our audience about, was this loss to Miami worse than the loss to Carolina when the Falcons were shut out 30-0 in week 3? I know you talked to some guys in the locker room. Specifically, I think Caden Ellis had some really important things to say about the response to this loss. So I'm kind of curious where you land on this.
The answer overall is kind of a yes, because we are in week 8.
Right.
The Carolina game was in week 3. And Caden Ellis pointed out that that's kind of too early to see trends or issues that you can highlight in film and review to improve. Now that we're in week 8, changes do have to be made, he said, or they can be made. They should be made at this point. And it's not necessarily a whole team change from what he was saying. It's more individual, where he's going to look at the Carolina game, the Bills game, even though the Falcons won, which I found interesting, and then also the 49ers game, in that he's going to see how teams directly attacked him and where he can be better, because it starts individually, because if all of your collective pieces are doing well, the whole should be as well.
Yeah.
That's the thought, at least.
Yeah.
We'll see if that happens. But that's the reason that this feels almost worse than Carolina.
Yeah, I think that where I land on this, I kind of go both ways. I think the Carolina game was, at the time, and then in the weeks thereafter, I did feel like it was kind of this anomaly. I know coaches and players and everybody was like, that's not who we are. That's not what we do. That's not who we're about. And we're going to make sure it doesn't happen again. And then you kind of move forward, and for the most part, it wasn't happening. You saw some improvement. You saw Michael Penix playing a lot better. Like there were some things to take out of the weeks that followed. However, the reason why I kind of am leaning towards the way that you're talking as well about this loss to Miami feels even worse at this point in time as the Carolina loss did is because of where we are in the season. Because we know how the Bucs are kind of outpacing the NFC South and how different it feels now, especially knowing that the Falcons go on the road over the next 2 weeks and play 2 teams that arguably are, no pun intended, on the rise, with the New England Patriots and the Indianapolis Colts. So I think like that's where I ultimately stand on it. I think the only argument you could make, but again, I don't even want to make this argument because I don't even know if I fully believe it, is that, well, the Falcons were without 6 starters between your starting quarterback, your starting number 1 receiver, your arguably most important cog in the defensive will and Divine Deablo, along with Jalen Walker, Billy Bowman Jr. I mean, there were so many absences throughout the collective team that I'm like, okay, yeah, you can chalk that up as being a reason why this happened, but that feels hollow to me. Like, and I think no one even in the locker room, on the podium, whatever post game was even making that excuse. But I think if you're right, like no one even says anything like that. So I think that's why I kind of have to lean on this may be worse. It also happened at home in front of your home crowd. Like it just at a very pivotal time in the season. And I know we're going to later in this podcast, we're going to go into kind of what the next steps are for this team after this loss, but it's really hard to look past the performance today.
Yeah, and I think another reason, especially going back to Kaden Elliss, because he spoke the longest and the most in depth in the locker room about this loss, is he felt there were good plays that the defense made. There were a lot of tackles for loss. They were rushing well, he said. And he couldn't say the same things about the Panthers. So the Falcons, he thinks, played better in this game against the Dolphins than they did against the Panthers. But they still lost, and that's kind of why it hurts more.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
No, I think it does. And I mean,
it's tough all around.
Yeah. And I was even, we were talking to Raheem Morris and Kirk Cousins at the podium after the game. And it was interesting because Raheem Morris, I think he only talked for like 4 minutes and 40 seconds.
You called it.
I did. I called it. I said, I don't think this is going to be a very long post-game podcast or a post-game interview, but I was very curious to see kind of what his reaction was to this, comparatively speaking to what it was in Carolina. And his prevailing comment was that this was a very humbling day. It was an all-around bad day. I don't think there's anything that he can kind of... I think he was very honest, and Kirk Cousins was too, in the way that they're like, there's really nothing we can say about that other than like there are things that have to be fixed and cleaned up. And I think that's honestly where you have to go from here.
The issue is you cannot call this one an anomaly.
Right. It's happened before.
One mulligan, and now that's it.
Yeah, I agree. Oh, okay. Well, let's move on to the second quarter as we talk about the Falcons' offensive issues. Now, obviously, the score was 34-10, so the Falcons did get in the end zone late in the game, but by that point, it did feel like a little too late.
It was definitely too little too late.
Yeah. And so third down conversions, the Falcons were 2 of 11 in third down conversions. I have a hard time with that one because as we were talking to Kirk Cousins after the game, he made the comment, he was like, there was no stacking plays together offensively. So whether it was run, whether it was pass, whatever the case may be, they weren't stacking good play upon good play. And so you get to this where you go into the fourth quarter and you haven't converted a single third down. A big issue within that is that the run game continues to be kind of a thorn in the Falcons' side over the last 2 weeks. They only had 45 yards on the ground against Miami this weekend. Last weekend, only 62 yards on the ground against San Francisco. I'm curious, Terrin, where you land on what happens when the Falcons offense can't get the run game going.
You saw what would happen if the Falcons can't get the run game going today. It stifles the entire offense. And Raheem Morris did say that the run game is the Falcons' lifeline.
Yeah.
Well, they had 1 rushing yard in the first quarter.
1. Yeah.
1.
Yeah.
Uno.
Yeah. I don't know what else to say beyond that.
I know.
You had 1.
If it's your lifeline,
yeah,
I don't want that to be my lifeline.
Right, yeah, because it doesn't feel as though that's anything of which you can build upon.
And it's so shocking because the stats we explained on the Friday 5 showed that the Dolphins had the 32nd ranked run defense.
Yeah. And they were not. And also, I will add, I said this on the Friday 5 episode that we did before this game as well. Like, the Miami Dolphins were not good against 12 personnel.
Yeah.
They were giving up, I think, 6.9 yards per play versus 12 personnel. There are very few teams that run more out of 12 personnel than the Atlanta Falcons. And I think they were averaging like 5.8 yards per play. So, like, in terms of a matchup, and this was something that I think you articulated well in the game breakdown, was that if you looked at this matchup on paper, there was no reason why the Falcons offense specifically shouldn't have come out as the better, more efficient team, even though they did not have Michael Penix Jr., who is working through a knee injury, and Drake London, who is working through a hip injury. Like, yes, those are big losses, but you still have your entire starting offensive line. You still have a quarterback who has 13 years of experience. You still have Bijan Robinson, Tyler Algier. Like, realistically, yes, it's going to pigeonhole you a little bit, but it shouldn't have to the degree it did.
Correct. I mean, looking at the numbers right now, the Dolphins were 25 or lower when it comes to any type of offensive ranking.
Right.
That's points per game, total yards, rush yards, pass yards. possession average. Your defense, the Falcons defense should have exploited that. And meanwhile, the Falcons offense is top 10 in everything besides points per game, which came to fruition on Sunday, that they should have ran over the the Dolphins defense.
Right.
Like on paper, the Falcons should have won this game, but it's never that simple.
Right, yeah. And I think that there were some things where they were clogging down the run, and then there were some, miscues and miscommunication with the pass game. There were a couple times where Kirk thought that the receiver that he was targeting was going to run his route farther downfield, and he stops and turns back. Like, I think that happened with David Sills coming out of halftime. It happened with Kadero Hodge a little later in the game. So there were some moments too where there was it's not like there's one issue offensively that we can point to within this game to be like, oh yeah, if they would have done this, then it would have been a completely different game. Like, no, like they couldn't run the ball. They were having a hard time connecting via the pass. They weren't stringing drives together. And this was the moment too that I thought was the epitome of what the Falcons were doing offensively, was when it was that drive, and you'll have to remind me when exactly it was. I think it was in the second quarter or the third quarter when they were able to finally get closing in on the red zone because of a 39-yard defensive pass interference call, followed by a 17-yard Bijan Robinson screen or run. But it was like the first time that they got in the red zone.
Third quarter.
First time that they got in the red zone. And then Bijan Robinson on the next carry fumbles the ball.
And Bijan hadn't fumbled a ball since week 15 of 2023, his rookie season. He had 556 straight scrimmage touches without a lost fumble, which ties for the second longest by a Falcons player since 1991. He has fixed those issues because if I remember correctly, he had a few fumbles his rookie year, and it was a big point of emphasis for him moving on.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that was something that as I was thinking about this game, that was the moment where I felt like, oh, that's the epitome of these offensive issues. Like, the Falcons got a break. They finally get it into the 20, inside the 20, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, nope, there goes the ball, there goes possession.
Yeah. And then the Dolphins scored.
Yeah.
Or field goal, one of the two.
Yeah, they did put points
on the board.
They put points on the board. Yeah. So we're going to move on to our halftime, and this, in case anyone is curious, this podcast is brought to you by Microsoft CoPilot, and this halftime stat has been curated by them. The Falcons had 11 total first downs today. That was tied for their fewest in a game over the last 18 seasons. Since 2008, there have been 3 other instances of the Falcons only accounting for 11 total first downs, and that's comparatively speaking to the Miami Dolphins, who I think had 24 total first downs, and I think 6 of the Falcons' 11 first downs came in the fourth quarter when it's kind of like you gotta have it and you're throwing the ball downfield. Like, that is not sustainable. You want to look to a reason why the Falcons lost this game. It's like, well, they weren't moving the ball. So as we move on to the third quarter, I do think that we need to talk about this defense. It kind of felt like an uncharacteristic performance from this group. I know that they're coming off of a game in which Christian McCaffrey broke even Christian McCaffrey level records, but that was kind of the expectation, I think, a little bit for that game specifically. This was a Miami offense that has, for lack of a better word, struggled mightily over the course of the first half of this season and have had so many offensive issues. Tua Tagovailoa has spoken ad nauseum about the issues that they have, but they were able to move the ball. They were able to get some chunk yardage. They were able to take advantage of some defensive pass interference calls, which is something that the secondary is not necessarily known for committing. I'm curious, Terrin, what was your main takeaway from this defensive performance as it stood?
I know with the offense, we just said we can't blame the players who were missing. So I'm not blaming the defensive issues on players who were missing, but you can't talk about the defense without talking about who was missing.
Exactly.
It was a roster of big names.
Yeah, so as we know, Jalen Walker, Billy Bowman Jr. have been out for a couple games. I think Billy Bowman Jr., this is now his third game. He has a hamstring injury. Jalen Walker, a groin issue that's kind of been plaguing him since training camp. So those two were out. They've not been there for the last two games at least. But the Falcons were also missing Zach Harrison, who has become a very important piece of that interior defensive line. I think he, going into this game, was leading the Falcons in sacks.
3.5.
Yes, so that's a big miss that I think was honestly overshadowed with all of the other pieces that weren't there. But the main one that we have to talk about, which we talked about in the first quarter and in the intro, is that the Falcons did not have Divine Deablo. And so JD Bertrand got the start. And it was very obvious. Terrin and I literally looked at each other probably within the first 12 plays for Miami between their first couple of drives. And we were like, oh, they are picking on JD Bertrand, whether in the run or the pass.
They're bullying poor JD.
Yeah. And I think, I don't blame them.
No, that's called a plan of attack.
Yeah.
It's a game plan.
Yeah.
Defensive game plan or offensive game plan.
Yeah.
But what I'm surprised, and I'm curious your thoughts on this. When Jeff Ulbrich said he was going to do a by committee approach to replace Divine Deablo, I don't feel like we saw that today.
No, I didn't necessarily. Outside of they did rotate Ronnie in, who just recently got elevated to the active roster.
Ronnie Harrison.
Yes, yeah. Sorry, I just said Ronnie like it's
buddies. We're buddies.
Yeah, but no,
Ronnie from the Jersey Shore. Weird.
But no, he did come in on a couple of third down packages, kind of as a big safety look. It wasn't like they rotated JD Bertrand out for him. Like JD Bertrand,
he was in
the whole time. So it was a bit less of a by committee approach than I originally thought. Because we talked all week how I was like, okay, you got DeMarco Helms, you could do some stuff with elevating Ronnie. You have him. You have D'Angelo Malone. Maybe you could do something with him. Like Josh Woods, if you need a thumper or somebody. I felt like there were a wide range of options that the Falcons had if they wanted to do something a bit more creative in terms of personnel, but they chose not to, outside of Ronnie coming in every so often.
Right.
And I'm curious to see how much, if that changes at all, because you're not going to have Divine Deablo for at least 3 more games.
Right, because he's on injured reserve officially as of Saturday.
Right, so you can count technically this Sunday's loss.
Look at that last minute decision.
To that first game that you have to miss out of 4 if you're on IR. But I don't know. Like I'm curious to see where it goes from here.
A plan of mine already is to ask Jeff Ulbrich on whenever he speaks this week why it wasn't a by committee, just out of curiosity. Hey, if you fully believe in JD Bertrand,
right,
more power to you. Make that decision. That's on you, Jeff.
Yeah. And I'm curious if, again, especially against these 2 opponents that you have coming up with the Patriots and with the Colts, specifically the Colts, and how much success they're having running the ball, specifically with Jonathan Taylor. Like I am worried about how this Divine Deablo absence is going to continue to roll on until you get him back.
No, I agree.
Because I don't know if what we saw against the Miami Dolphins this afternoon is enough confidence in JD Bertrand or whoever else the Falcons decide to throw out there. I don't know. And I think that you saw Miami take advantage of those one-on-one moments that JD Bertrand had against a tight end or a running back coming out of the backfield. Like there were just some moments, and I haven't watched any film, but yet I'm only going off of our view from the press box, but I have to imagine that there has to be some evolution in the way that the Falcons are working out their inside linebacker core.
Or not even just the inside linebacker core, defending the run. Yeah,
that too. And we've known that to be a big question mark for this defense over the course of 8 weeks.
Yes.
All right. Well, we have one more quarter for you guys, and then we'll get you out of here. So, Terrin, I've posed this question 4 times as we've been sitting here talking about this game, because there is a part of me that's just like, I don't really know what else there is to say about this game specifically and this performance specifically. So where do the Falcons go from here? Like, what do they do? Knowing you have the Patriots on deck, knowing you have a trip to Germany to face the Colts, knowing that you come back and you have a division game thereafter. Like, this next 3, you needed this win for all of the reasons that we've said previously, like that you should win this game, playoff teams win this game, but we're now going into a 3-week stretch that's going to be tough sledding and on the road for a significant amount of time.
Yeah. Cool. I mean, it's a tough question.
I know. I don't have the answer to that.
Right?
Like, yeah.
I think of the locker room, both from the team side and the external side, about the questions that are just being asked. Mm-hmm. Questions are now starting to be asked about, okay, why are you so inconsistent? Mm-hmm. Like, Carolina's no longer an anomaly. Like, today proves that you can do that, flop again and again. Who knows how many times this might happen. That's probably one of the biggest highlights from the locker room. Another one is the team sticking together? Like, those questions are starting to be asked. Right. Like, how do you keep the locker room together after a loss like this, or after the 2 losses like the past 2?
Yeah.
And the team is answering those questions the right way. Like, we have a great locker room. We have great teammates. Like, we all believe in one another. Like, it's going to be okay. Mm-hmm. So there's no divide in that sense. And then another question that's being asked is, how do you handle it? Like, how do you handle these losses? And the Falcons' mentality, and they're sticking to it, is you flush it. They said it after Carolina. You got to move on. You got to move on. Every Sunday is a new Sunday. It's 1 week at a time. You can't let them bleed into each other. Yeah. Whether or not that's the right approach, I don't know. Everyone is different. Like, everyone handles losses, wins, how to go about an entire 18-week, 17-game season differently. But at this point, they're sticking to the exact same kind of wording that they used after Carolina. Mm-hmm. We got to flush this, and we got to move on.
Yeah. And I'd say you got to get back on track. Yes. You know, like, that has to be priority number 1. You saw what you could do, who you could be against the Buffalo Bills, a little bit against the Washington Commanders. But since those 2 games, it kind of has been a bit of a hit or miss over the last 2 weeks. And so I'm curious to see what that ultimately looks like, because we did see them bounce back after that Carolina loss, but then it tapers off, and it is one of those things where it kind of does feel. Raheem Morris talks all the time about this emotional roller coaster, getting off the emotional roller coaster, and I know what this league is. Mm-hmm. The league wants there to be an emotional roller coaster. It wants any given Sunday that any team can beat anybody else on any given day.
Today proved it.
Today proved that, and I'm sitting here too wondering about the injuries and how long we're going to be discussing those things as well, because the Falcons do not have a bye week coming up. You know, like, they do. They are they're coming off of their bye week 2 weeks ago. So
they're in the thick of it.
They're in the thick of it, and it's not getting any easier. If anything, it's getting more difficult to go from a West Coast trip last week to, okay, you're going out to Germany in 2 weeks' time. So you have all of this, plus your starting quarterback is working through a knee injury. Your starting number 1 receiver is working through a hip injury. You have all of these defensive players that are questionable, have been out for a couple weeks, like, will continue to be out for a couple weeks. There are so many variables with those injuries that it's almost like, do you remember when we were talking about the Washington Commanders and that week? And
this year?
Yes. And we were talking about the Washington Commanders, and then a couple weeks later, we were talking about the San Francisco 49ers, and we were kind of saying how, according to which individuals are up and who are available, you get a very different team.
The 49ers felt like that specifically. We're like, okay, we're either getting the I hate saying this, but the A team or the B team.
Right, yeah.
Because of how many starters were injured.
Exactly, and who had missed a bunch of time. And it almost has felt like, okay, that's what the conversation around the Falcons could be for other teams looking in about which Falcons team are we going to get? If you're the Patriots, which Falcons team is going to show up to Gillette? If you're the Colts, which Falcons team is going to make the trip to Germany? And again, if you're the Bucks, the Saints, the Panthers, which Falcons team are you going to see?
And we're going to find out actually rather soon, because after New England, after Indianapolis/Germany, you have the Panthers and Saints back to back.
Right.
Then you have 2 games and then the Bucks, and then 2 games and then the Saints. It's very NFC South heavy loaded in the second half of this season.
Yeah.
Gosh, we're not even halfway through.
No, we are not. And so I think that is why this next stretch of games, I know we talked about this game against Miami being a must-win for the reasons of you are fundamentally should be a better team and you should win this game, and then they didn't. So now it just absolutely turns up the fire to kind of make it a must-win. These games coming down the wire over the course of the next month and a half, you got to win them. There's no option. Well, that is our final quarter. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I know that probably wasn't the most fun game to go over if you were a Falcons fan, but I appreciate you hanging with us. Make sure you like and comment and subscribe to the Atlanta Falcons Podcast Network, and make sure to follow along with all of mine and Terrin's reporting over the course of the next week, and we will see you when the Falcons face the New England Patriots next week at Gillette Stadium. Thanks, guys.